If I Should Die by Donevy, Westphal. Prologue. What brought me full circle to the faith of my father was the most bizarre case in my years-long file of missions. I'd always been formidable. Indeed, I took pride in my Scottish heritage. The almost godlike warrior in body, mind, and soul, honor-bound to my duty, come what may. But no one is perfect except God. And even though my body was still responding to the challenges thrown at me, I felt like I was losing my mind. PTSD had become the new watchword for some of us from the Vietnam era, but most of us didn't understand how it worked. All I knew was that I was diagnosed just after my buddy, Mike German, had died on an important assignment. Mike and I met as young recruits in the military, and our friendship lasted a lifetime. Mike, codenamed Snowman, and his team had been tightening the noose around this international crime ring, and close to bringing some truly evil characters to justice. Everyone was in place when Snowman hit someone's radar. His murder almost put an end to the mission. Mike and I were two peppers in the tamale. He had no family, and I had cut loose from mine. My father and I didn't see life exactly the same, not exactly a unique experience for a young person in the 60s. I had been taught better than to dishonor my father. But he was like Santa Claus. He knew when I was sleeping and when I was awake. Worse, he knew when I was in the wrong place at the right time. I had a talent for what my friends called Charlie Brown stunts, and Dad always knew. He had eyes in the back of his head and everywhere else. If I did something in town, he knew it before I arrived home. For all of our disagreements, I still loved him. But the volcano of anger and frustration buried it, and overnight our once close-knit, loving family turned into a bitter, fractured group. The more my father reached out to me, the more resentful and cynical I became. I wanted out. So at the turn of the decade, I left home to join the Marine Corps, and that's where I met Mike. I was a young buck of 17 from North Carolina, ready to confront the world. And just like that, military service relieved me of quite a few of my starry-eyed ideas about myself and my relationships. There is something to the saying that there are no atheists in the foxhole. With our time done, Mike and I were recruited to become a part of an elite organization that claimed to help bring peace and democracy to the struggling people of the world. I wasn't for it, but Mike was. And what did I have to lose? I had nowhere else to go. Sure, I was a war survivor with several medals, but to those who mattered most, I was dead. Which was just as well, because after leaving home in a huff, the way I did, announcing I would never return, I would never be able to find enough humility to go back and admit I was wrong. So I put my medals and ribbons in a box and stored them away. Now this, in just the past year, our Special Ops Force had lost 2 good agents, including Mike. My wife and child had been forced under protection. Some doctor was telling me I had this thing called PTSD. My beloved President Reagan had come under attack, and Oliver North was to face questioning. And the only response I seemed to be able to muster to it all was this intense desire to go back home and tell my dad how very wrong I had been. So I turned in my resignation, and then, just as my last mission ended, I got one more call. Chapter 1. Tuesday, June 9th, 1987. Joshua glanced at his watch before disembarking from the 727 at Narita International in Tokyo. He raced up the flight of stairs, 2 at a time, stopping at the gate. Dropping his suitcase, he slapped his tickets on the counter. "Hold this flight to Chicago." "Sir, they are latching the door." "Hold that flight," he flashed his badge at the agent. The man reached for his phone but kept his eyes on Josh. "Yes, sir, but you'll need to send that luggage," he pointed to his suitcase. Then, clutching his briefcase like a football, Joshua sailed through the oncoming traffic, pulling the black case ever tighter to his chest as he wove through the throngs, breaking his long run only at the corners. When he reached his gate, he strode purposefully to the desk and presented his tickets before jogging to his plane. He felt the young flight attendant's narrowed eyes as she checked his boarding pass. He quickly surveyed the passengers in first class, then he took the aisle back to the half-empty economy section. His seatmate looked up from his book and shifted closer to the window. "That was close, mister." "Tell me about it." Joshua frowned, catching his breath. These maneuvers were getting old. How many times had he needed to sprint miles through airports, parachute from planes, dodge bullets, and duck the fists of capable assassins bent on his destruction? "Miss," he said, signaling for the flight attendant. "Yes, sir." "I'd like to stretch out. Mind if I move to those empty seats?" "Fine," she said. "I could put your briefcase up." "No, ma'am, but thank you." He scooted across the aisle and flipped the armrests up, then stretched across the seats, his arm wrapped around his case. Waiting long enough to get a feel for the activity around him, he relaxed. He was used to resting with one eye closed, leaving his mind in neutral. "Wish I hadn't had to use my badge. I don't need the trail." Regret wasn't a good companion, but since it was already here, he indulged. "Junko, why is our time always too short? Half an hour in a park. Agent Shields spends more time with you than I." When someone jostled his case, he grasped an arm near his cheek. The attendant gasped. "Sorry, sir. Just wondered if you'd like something to drink." She rubbed her arm. Eyes open now, his mind became fully engaged. "Sorry, I startled, man. Get some ice on that so it doesn't bruise." "I'll be more careful next time," she frowned. He looked at her through narrowed eyes. Was there a double meaning to her words? "You'll be back around?" "Yes, there'll be a meal in an hour." He tried to relax, not convinced that she was sincere. "Juice, please," he said, sitting. This is going to be a really long trip. Wednesday morning, June 10th. On layover in Chicago, Josh found a private one-stall restroom and locked the door. Layer upon layer, his reddish-blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair complexion disappeared. He worked more skin color into his hands. He brushed his dark brown wig into place and took a closer look at the brown contacts. That'll do. He checked his new credentials. Yes. Julius C. Armstrong, freelance journalist. You're ready for your next and last assignment. And just in time as the bathroom intercom called his flight. One more hour and he'd be heading for his day's destination, some remote Midwestern town called Beetle River. "I don't want a white car. Is that all you've got?" Julius glared. "Well, today's Wednesday," the rental agent said. "Our fleet has been hit pretty hard this week. Vacuum salesman convention, but bring it back. Call first, maybe Friday. We'll have something more along the lines you're looking for," the rental agent said. "Thanks." Julius grasped the keys off the counter. "I'll call. Have a good day." Julius found his rental in the lot. Disgruntled, he gazed at the white Buick Somerset and shook his head. He'd stand out like an elephant in a flamingo convention. At least the clerk said they'd have another vehicle available, maybe tomorrow or Friday. He slid in and started on the last 30 miles of his trip. Before hitting the interstate, he found a convenience store. The 14-hour-long flight from Tokyo had left him drained and consumed by a pounding headache. The final 30 miles would require aspirin and caffeine. The clerk, a young brunette woman, smiled unassumingly. He'd never been in the Midwest, yet it had a comforting, familiar feel. He placed his bottle of Coke, bag of chips, and aspirin on the counter. Julius dug through a few Japanese yen in his pocket and pulled out a $10 bill. He slid back into his car, gulped down a couple aspirin with his Coke, and found his way on Interstate 80 west. He merged into the heavy traffic, but traffic quickly thinned as he continued west. Rolling hills gave way to green fields, green pastures dotted with cows and a few trees. Green and white signs flashed by almost every 5 to 10 miles, announcing small towns tucked behind hills. Julius was able to use the signs to tick off the distance he'd traveled. 5, 10, 15, 25. Any time now he ought to see, yes, an exit sign for Beetle River. And there were trees in the state, tall trees. beside the Beetle River exit. His mobile phone buzzed, and he pulled across to the shoulder of the exit ramp.